Okay, Josh has started the recording.
Okay, good morning, everyone. This is Tom Frank, Chair of the Vermont Board of Libraries. We're starting at 10 a.m. sharp. Very good. Let's go around first the board members, and then I'll have Kathy introduce non-board members. And then we'll see any additions to or changes to the agenda, and then we'll ask the guest to identify themselves at that time. Okay, so first of all, I'm Tom Frank, Chair. Who else do we have?
I can
The other
go
board
next. Yeah. Adrienne Katz, and I worked as a public librarian at the St. John's Berry Athenaeum, occasional school librarian as a substitute, also a friend of the library, of my hometown library, and I worked for the state working for Act 250, District 4 Environmental Commission, the Natural Resources Board. Using my librarian skills.
Yeah, using your library skills, right? Dealing with this
database and.
Okay, then we have Lisa.
Yeah, hi, I'm Lisa Barron, a new member to the board. So yeah, I'm happy to be here.
Okay, welcome, Lisa. And where are you working now?
I am the Director of Human Resources at Gifford Healthcare, a hospital system in Randolph, Vermont.
Yeah, very good. And then Rick.
Hi, I'm Rick Bates. I'm retired, and I'm on the board of the Wethersfield Proctor Library down in Wethersfield. I've been on the board for years. And I edit a poetry magazine in my spare time. That's me.
Okay, very well. So then turn over to Kathy, the library director and commissioner of Department of Libraries.
Thanks, Tom. Before you turn it to me, I don't think we heard from James yet. James is in person at the department.
Yeah.
Oh,
thank you.
You're there, James. Sorry, I didn't hear you come in. Sorry, James.
That's
I apologize.
Okay. I'm doing pretty good, thank you. Glad that it's warming up and brightening up outside.
Okay.
I'm a professor emeritus at Purdue University, and I just wrote down a couple of things. I enjoyed a lot of writing about Vermont, but particularly a couple of my favorite authors, Shirley Jackson and Howard Frank Moshe. And a book that I wrote about Howard Frank Moshe is Howard Frank Moshe and the Classics, where I tied him in with writers going all the way back to Shakespeare actually, and on up to present day writers. And I kind of enjoyed our relationship that we had for the brief time that we did have it. And he introduced me to a lot of things going on in the Northeast Kingdom.
Very good. And once again, I apologize that you snuck in there. What can I say?
That's okay. I also have the mask. So that's
Okay, James. Okay, now Kathy.
Thanks, Tom. I'm Catherine Delnow. I am the commissioner of the Department of Libraries and also go by the title of state librarian. And some of our department staff are here this morning. Some of them are not. I want to say Jeanette is on a well-deserved break, so is not tuning in from Germany, but Assistant State Librarian Tom McMurdo is with us.
Good morning, everyone. Nice to see you.
Morning,
and
Tom.
we have April Shaw here, our reference and government consultant.
Good morning.
Also from Tom's team, we have Lauren Kelly.
Good morning.
Lauren is our technical services consultant, and we have Josh, who is in the in-person room.
Good morning, everybody.
And representing the library advancement team, we have Karen Gravlin, who is our able library director and also our library consultant for access.
Good morning.
And that is all of us today. Oh, wait, Jess Leal is here. Hang on. This is an important introduction. Jess, come on
yes.
screen.
Please introduce Jess.
Jess is brand new in her role at the department, and she is the executive staff assistant for the Department of Libraries.
Hi, everyone. It's good to meet you all.
And while we're looking at Jess here on screen, I just want to remind everybody, if you have any questions ever about when the meeting is, if you need a forwarded document, if you have anything that you're needing from me, a great person to communicate with is Jess. And Jess is, I'm always available to you directly as well, especially if for some reason Jess is away from her desk. But for board members, if you're looking for meeting information or anything like that, please don't hesitate to call the library's general line, 802-636-0040, I believe it is. And that will get you Jess always, most times. Pretty much, she's here in the building 5 days a week, and she's the primary phone person. And you can also email with her directly if you have any questions. Just don't want things to get lost in other staff's inboxes if they're out of the office.
Right. And her job is to tell Kathy to take a deep breath. This too shall pass. Yes, right.
And Tom, members of the public, I'm not seeing anybody else in our attendee list right now.
Okay, because I heard some names coming in, but all staff. Okay, they were coming in fast and furious there. So no members of the public. So the next thing would be, are there any changes to the agenda? No changes to the agenda. We'll go on the next thing, and I will ask to make sure it's on the record. Are there any members of the public that would wish to speak on any subject dealing with the library? If not, then we'll go, and that's on another page. The next item on the agenda there, Kathy, was, I read it several times. And
approval of the minutes of the January 9th meeting.
Duh. That's always there. Yeah, the January 9th meeting. I didn't say any issues. Did anybody else see any issues with those minutes?
Yeah, no corrections. Initially, I had seen in the collection development section that my name wasn't Adrian Katz, it said like Adrian Frank, but it looks like that had been already edited and corrected. Thank you.
If I may share, one of our board members did extra great work proofing the minutes so that we could update them and repost them before the meeting. And I want to thank James for being really helpful in that way. I received a note from James, and he was very gentle in noticing some of the areas for improvement. So thank you, James, for your attention to that. It saved us a lot of time by making those corrections so that they could be posted well in advance. Our
new Bruce, right? Bruce was really the picky one before. and out now, James. And thank you, James. That is very, very appreciated. Okay, well, do I have a most? Oh, I'm sorry.
That the English teacher in me, I can't get rid of it. So it's
okay.
Still
Well, that is good. That is excellent. So,
yeah.
Is there a
when
motion
that happens,
to?
Before we go to the motion, if we could just send out an email, that would be great to know that was updated, because I had read these minutes before, and so it would be helpful to know when there are edits, or at least there's something major that happens. That'd be great. Thank you, James, for doing all that work.
I assume, James, you were doing the grammatical and punctuation and all of that.
Yeah. Exactly. And I've been doing it now for about 45 years. So like I said, it's become a habit. I fairly good. I proofread my own writing about, they say writing is revising. So if it needs to be revised several times, and for me, I used to have to revise things about 13 times in order to get it what I call close to perfect. But so it's a pleasure to do it.
Okay. Once again, thank you.
If I can, as a secretary, I'll just share. It seems like it should be much easier for us to to send out an update if there are edits that have been, if there are corrections prior to the meeting. We've been really, really short-staffed, and so I was just happy that we posted them. But Adrian, your point is well taken.
Yeah, now we have Jess there to
Yeah.
help out, who I understand is an AI expert as well. So throw that through AI and see what they say. If that doesn't go hallucinate. Yeah, what do you mean by that? Okay. Anyway, so is there a motion to approve the minutes? Any
I
motion
move
to
that we
approve?
approve the minutes.
Okay, thank you, James. The second?
I can second the motion.
Okay, any other additions or additions or correction that you see to the minutes? Hearing none, if all in favor of approving these minutes, signify by saying aye.
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 I,
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay, the minutes have been approved. Very good. Okay. Next on there, Kathy, I already missed one thing.
Oh, yeah, the next topic on the agenda for today is to review and discuss updates to the bylaws, which were last revised May 13th, 2014. So they are in need of some, at least minor revision and potentially larger revision. And just to share, today the idea is that there would be a discussion and that some feedback would be taken on them. And then I would, as the secretary, or another member of the board, if you wish to have a different member of the board work on it, would go back based on today's conversation, draft potential updates to the bylaws and bring them back for further discussion of the specific adjustments, specific edits at a future meeting with appropriate notice per the current bylaws. So we would have to follow the current bylaws process for updating the bylaws.
Fortunately, we don't follow the current bylaws totally because it would be very cold meeting up at the Mid-State Library. And that's where it said the meetings would be held, I think. There is no Mid-State Library anymore. And that's still in the bylaws.
Mhm.
So that would be I think the other part on meeting the minutes, it said electronically and otherwise. And I think everything said there was a statement that said, and in conformance with the open meeting laws as well.
If I may make a suggestion, in addition to, so on page 2, at the bottom of page 2, under regular meetings, section 1, it does state that the meetings will be held at the Mid-State Library Service Center in Berlin. It also talks about, it says, quote, individual board members may participate in regular or special board meetings via telephonic or electronic means of communication. Board meetings may be conducted either entirely by telephonic or electronic means when properly warned as such. My recommendation in this section about regular meetings would be to simply state when the regular meetings take place, and then to include language that refers to open meeting law, so that we don't have a separate system here. Open meeting law has been updated a couple of times during the pandemic. And because it's changed and it continues to change, I believe that there's even legislation under consideration this session. I think the easiest thing for us to do is to make sure that we comply with current open meeting law requirements and just refer to that other authoritative source here. Because otherwise, if we would have to change the bylaws every time we go online or not online. And I'm not actually entirely sure about this telephonic or electronic and how that aligns with current open meeting law. So that would be my recommendation.
Because I'm sorry, go ahead. whoever was speaking
I
there.
agree with what Kathy has said supersedes what I was going to suggest, which was to modernize the language. For example, those words like telephonic or electronic, maybe the words could be like by telephone or virtually or other language, but I'd rather follow what's the open meeting law. If they have a particular vocabulary or what structure we need to follow. I also had that interest in updating the language in the bylaws.
I would agree. We're going to have to follow the open meeting law regardless. It doesn't make any sense to say that we're going to follow it and then set up something else that we're also going to follow.
Right, because in the open meeting law, it says you have to have a fixed location. If you're doing Zoom or telephonic or whatever, you have to have a fixed location. And I think Kathy said, talk to that may have changed. So whatever the open meetings say, if it says we have to have a fixed location that people can go to, yes, we'll do that. And if it says we don't have to.
I
Or
think
we could break both too, like virtually plus the on-site option. That's what we advertise on our website,
Yeah,
but we can always change that too.
we might want to just align. So right now, my sense is that we're going beyond the requirement of open meeting law by providing the on-site option. And we do that because we have a board member who would like to be in the on-site option, but we do that even for many of our other department meetings, like when the working group was taking place. We're trying to be sure members of the public have access to the meeting and can participate even without internet access at home. But we might want to, in the bylaws, just point to open meeting law, and then we can always excel. We can always go beyond what it says there if that's not a requirement anymore.
yeah.
But I wouldn't necessarily write that in the
bylaws.
minutes. I would say if there are meetings that they'll be held here at 60 Washington Street, we could say that, or we could, we do sometimes, I've heard that people would like to meet in person at times. So we could just say where the meeting will be held if it's in person. So I can take this feedback from you all and come back with a draft that encompasses some of that and really is pointing heavily toward open meeting law, if that sounds agreeable.
Yeah, well, for the meeting location, it could be this state complex in Barry, but it could also be, or any other deemed appropriate location, because in the past, I believe the Board of Libraries has gone to different libraries and traveled to different sites. So that flexibility built in, it was, similar to your library minutes where you had the state librarian or their designee. Same kind of concept, like having that openness for other meeting locations.
And we also could have the primary location be online and the secondary location be, I need to look at the current version of open meeting law because there were some changes to it in 2023. The guidance from the Secretary of State's office dates from 2019, I believe. So I just want to be sure about that before we bring something back to you. But if possible, giving the flexibility to say the regular physical location is here. And if not, that would be a special, we would notice it perhaps. If we went down to Ascutney, we would notice it and that we would still have the online option, something like that.
I think when you're talking about the open meeting law too, that it addresses what a quorum is. And in our bylaws, in section 5 of this same article 4, it talks about what a quorum is, but I don't think it necessarily matches what the open meeting law says. So maybe that's something to also just sort of look at in the same, at the same time.
That's in section 5 of article 4.
Mhm.
And I'll highlight that we need to check on the quorum. I'd also like to make a recommendation about some other sections of article 4, one being section 3, special meetings. Open meeting laws requirements are quite different from the
Mhm.
requirement of time of at least 7 days. Noticing at least 7 days is far in excess of open meeting law. I believe open meeting law is 48. No, for a special meeting, 24 hours, I think. Let me look. Hang on.
I think there's an emergency one and then there's a special one.
Yeah, special meetings, at least 24 hours before a special meeting is what the guidance document from the Secretary of State's office says at the bottom of page 5. So I would recommend here aligning with this. It's much easier for our staff to keep with the one document than have two in play, and we've seen where that's tripped us up before. And not setting, we will strive to provide more more timely information than that, but not imposing a stricter requirement on the department than the state laws impose would be really appreciated.
Yeah, I think probably the origin of that perhaps was that noticing today usually is through electronic, email communications, that sort of thing, versus like in the past, it might have been by mail, or it might have taken longer, that they needed more days. Having some days set in advance are helpful, but yeah, maybe not 10, or
Yeah,
like a week in advance is good. Or like, this is the minimum, and then here's where in reality we can provide it a little bit more in advance.
yeah. We can have a procedure in the office that has more,
Granular.
that has
Yeah.
more of a period, a more gracious period for noticing. And I think we can do that, but in the bylaws, keep to referring to open meeting law. And maybe even just referring to open meeting law here rather than documenting a date, because if it changes, then we don't have to update the minutes.
Kind of like how we're based on Robert's Rules of Order. We're using the latest version, kind of the same kind of concept.
Yeah, and along those lines, section 6, I would recommend that we just say, right now it says, section 6, parliamentary authority. The rules contained in the current edition of Robert's Rules of Order, newly revised, shall govern the board in all cases. We might want to look at whether newly revised is still the newest version. I think they're on newly revised version 12 or something like that. And maybe we could just refer to the current edition of Robert's Rules of Order. Then we can
Period.
continually update, if that sounds agreeable to you.
It's interesting, the legislature doesn't go by Robert's Rules of Order. But I forget what they go by because they don't require a second on most things.
Huh.
It isn't.
Were there
But
any
Robert's-
other ideas for this, or? Sorry, Tom.
The other thing is the terms. It kept saying 3 all of the time, if I remember correctly. And the terms for the government appointments are 4 years, and you can have a maximum of 2. Is that in the statute? What's the?
Oh, that's in the statute. I think that the terms of office would mean, Tom, that we couldn't, that the board couldn't appoint you president for more than 3 successive annual terms.
Annual term. That's
Yeah.
fine. Yeah. 3 successive. But I thought
Should we
in some
call
other
it-
places it sounded like 3 terms, because the
Yeah,
or
it
3
is-
make 3 1-year terms. Something to make sure it's, I forget the exact wording, but
Yeah,
And,
I'll read it to you. No officer shall be elected to the same office for more than 3 successive full terms. My understanding is you are suggesting that it could say no officer shall be elected to the same office for more than 3 successive 1-year terms.
correct.
That would be more
Yes.
clear.
Yeah. Yeah, that would be clear, because 3 terms, well, our terms are 4 years.
Yeah.
And you can't serve more than 2 4-year terms. And there's no place in there that says that it's probably in statute that if you finish an unfulfilled term, that doesn't count. I don't know if we want it in the bylaws, or is that just in the law itself?
I think that, I think that aspect as far as your 4-year terms and staying on for longer if it's vacant, that would probably be in Article 2, membership of the board. And that part of the bylaws just refers back to chapter 22 of statute, section 602. I do think we should be updating the way that that's written, because my sense is that this reference to statute, the references to statute don't look like they're in the standard reference, because I don't see the section sign, that little wiggly
Okay.
section sign. So
Right.
I can go through and update any necessary section signs, including, I think, that one about section 602. But I think the membership is in one article, and then the election of officers for 1-year terms is in
In the
Article
section.
3. So I think the terms of office in section 2 of Article 3 are just relating to the duration of the term as an officer. But that said, I
Mhm.
think your point is that it's nice to just clarify it, and we can make that change.
Right, because we're using the terms and meaning different things.
We-
Rick has his hand up.
Oh,
we-
Rick, yeah.
We might want to think about that when we're talking about terms as an officer. If I'm remembering what was just said, it referenced 3 full terms. And keeping the word full in there would allow for someone to come on partway through a year to replace someone in an office, and then and not have that count as one of the 3 years, because it's not a full.
Mhm.
So
Well,
we should maybe be mindful of that and not be hasty about striking the word full. It has some use.
well, perhaps 3 successive full, 1-year terms.
That would certainly clarify it.
Yeah, that would do it, right.
Okay.
I would hope nobody would come in and as soon as they come in, they're saying, "Your chair."
Right.
Well, there is something interesting though, because let me see. There was something about vacancies that I saw.
There's something about it in Article 3, Section 1.
Yeah, here it is. The board shall elect a member to fill the vacant office to serve until the next annual meeting. And then there's something almost contradictory in section 2, terms of office. The terms of office for the chair and vice chair shall be for 1 year from the election at the annual meeting or until a successor is elected. Why is there that flexibility? It's like we missed the January meeting and so Tom just keeps going.
I think that's always been in there as a safety valve so that you don't
Yeah.
wind up without a chair,
Co-chair.
and not having provided for a successor yet.
Yeah, and actually, I think when I came on as the state librarian, we were in a funny situation like that where Bruce had continued on because we hadn't done the election in January. So we could leave that language. That makes sense.
Yeah.
Also,
And-
Catherine, as you're looking for the way of crafting, as we talked about with the terms as an officer, maybe just using exactly the same language as is used in the last sentence of terms of office for more than 3 successive full terms, rather than saying the same thing in 2 different ways in the same document.
I'm wrapping my head slowly around what you're saying, Rick. I may need you to help me by emailing it.
Okay.
Emailing that suggestion
Yeah,
so that I get it right.
I guess what I'm saying is, in terms of office, they address that same issue of the coming in partway through a term and it not counting,
Uh-huh.
that we were addressing with the terms as an officer.
Mm-hmm.
And the language that we had just settled on that you had proposed and that we all said, yes, that does it, is different in that section than what we have at the beginning of section 2. And maybe they should be aligned. Pick what you said and put that in both places, perhaps. But if it's
Okay.
described differently in 2 places, it becomes reasonable for someone down the road to say, I wonder why they did it differently. They must have meant something.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, no, they didn't.
So you're recommending aligning the language at the bottom of the page, the first page, with the language at the top of the second page.
Well,
Section 2,
I'm not.
terms of office, and
Am I?
I don't know. Is that
Yeah,
what you were?
Yeah, I wasn't paying attention to where we were when we were having the discussion of
Oh,
the
okay.
terms of it as officers. Yes, you're right.
Okay.
Yes.
So I put a comment there that it may be possible to align that, so we can look at that as we craft some amendments, proposed amendments for review.
Good.
Yeah. It's a question I had about even this meeting, because it seemed like this meeting was a regular meeting that was delayed. The other meeting was canceled post eclipse, but also the state advocacy day at the State House. And it's not quite like we called a special meeting to discuss something. It was more of a delay. So that was also something that arose to me as a question when going through these bylaws, because they do outline the different procedures. So
I don't think I noticed that. So where in the
hold on one second.
So my understanding was that we were canceling the regular meeting, the one that's on the books all the time. And we were rescheduling it, so we should treat it as a special meeting. But I may have missed something. Because if it's not held on the second Tuesday, then it's not the regular meeting. It needs to be somehow called out as different, was my sense.
Yeah, that just protects us and just saying this is,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, you have to do.
So in
Whether
those
it's a
cases,
delayed or special, it doesn't make any difference, but special. I mean, just define anything that's not on the normal 4 dates is a special meeting.
and then we take the steps of noticing per open meeting law, telling the
Yeah.
radio station and updating the website and those. And I think we also update the state calendar of meetings.
Yeah. And yeah, nailing down those dates are important. So in case anyone, whether they're a board member or they're a member of the public, they want to make a comment, that they have appropriate notice to do so.
Right.
And when they can submit an item for like the agenda. And also perhaps there's a delineation between an agenda and then supplementary documents, because maybe it is nice to have the agenda with the links to the documents, or at least a referral back to the website so you can access the materials that way. But maybe the bare minimum is to provide the agenda items, and the supplementary documents could come at a different time, although it is nice to have it packaged together. Maybe that's not necessarily a requirement, but that's something else to look at as well. The word agenda, what does that mean? What does that include? Or do we want to delineate other things as well?
I think for the purposes of open meeting law, and this is one reason that it's a good idea to just refer back to the master document. My understanding is that, hang on, let me pull up the requirements for agendas. Open meeting law does not define agenda or specify the information an agenda must contain, except to require that the agenda designate it says physical, but again, this guidance document is outdated, to designate a physical location where a member of the public can attend and participate if a quorum or more members of a public body are attending remotely. The agenda should allow interested members of the public to be reasonably informed about what specific topics will be discussed and what actions may be taken at the meeting. So I think the agenda that what my understanding of what we need to do is say the topic and the possible action or the action. The supporting documents is something that I brought with me from California that is required by the Sunshine Ordinance, I think, or whatever their open meeting is called. And theirs is more stringent than us, and we had to, in that context, I think we had to solidify all documents and not change anything, even if you found a typo. So it's in some ways that practice, I hope it's helpful to you as board members, but what we've been doing is we don't change, if we're updating the agenda just by adding the link to the supporting document, we typically don't send out an announcement that it's changing to you as board members or members of the public, because we're just giving supplemental information. If we were to rearrange in advance of a meeting, if Tom was to decide to switch the order in advance of the meeting and not through changes to the agenda, we would send notice out about that.
Right. The bottom line is the purpose, the intent of the open meeting law is that you're not trying to sneak anything by anybody. That's really, oh, we'll let you talk right at the minute and put it at the end, so somebody can't attend, or vice versa. No, you're on it, at 11, and we hold it at 10 o'clock sharp. Oh, I'm sorry, you're too late. That's the whole intent, and we want to make sure we follow the intent of the law as well.
With these regular meetings, it says in here, that the regular meetings are held quarterly unless otherwise noticed by the secretary. When I think about a regular meeting and then a special meeting, I think a special meeting would be something that isn't one of these quarterly meetings. So even if this quarterly meeting isn't held on the second Tuesday, it's still a regular meeting. That's my interpretation. A special meeting would be, we're going to address something outside of the regular meeting topics, like, whatever. And that would be a special meeting. And then the emergency meeting is like even more, critical, where everyone needs to get together to make a decision in a quick manner.
I'm reading from I'm looking at the Secretary of State's guidance, and under special meetings on page 5, it says a special meeting occurs when a board meets at a time or place outside of its regular meeting schedule.
Mm-hmm.
So that,
exactly.
Well,
that's their definition.
That's their definition. So because we're meeting today outside of our regular meeting schedule, that is by definition a special meeting. There's another category for emergency meetings, and that is where it's not the regular meeting at its regular time or at a special time. It's an emergency
convening. So if we needed to meet in 2 weeks to talk about this again, it would just be a special meeting. What would differentiate it from today?
Nothing. This is a special meeting. We could have either canceled the meeting or we could have rescheduled it. But anytime we reschedule a public body's meeting, it needs to be noticed as a special meeting. It's not at its regular time.
Okay. Not sure.
Yeah, that whether we agree or not, that's what the Secretary of State has defined it. And
we do sometimes with the Board of Libraries call special meetings because we have more business to discuss than fits into the regular second Tuesday meeting. For example, if we had lots and lots of geographic naming petitions come to us, we might have monthly meetings. We're required to meet 4 times a year, and that's why I rescheduled our meeting, and also because I wanted to get all of your advice and talk with you and see you. But if we don't meet at the regular time, we have to notice it in a special meeting way. And that was true of our working group as well and other public bodies. If you have a regular time, then you have to meet then, or if you rescheduled, notice it as a special meeting. If you don't have a regular meeting time, every single meeting is a special meeting. That's guidance that I've received in the past with the working group. Initially, they hadn't set they hadn't made a resolution about the regular time that the working group met. So we had to go through the hoop of announcing the special meeting every single meeting. I think special just means it's not at the regular time. And then emergency is the, oh gosh, we have an emergency. We're calling the meeting quickly.
Mhm.
Yeah, clarifying that might be helpful, or referring to the statute, because I had the same.
Yeah, it's in the, those
It's
distinctions are on page 5 and 6 of the Secretary of State guidance. And we can pop that link in the chat and also put it in the minutes.
No,
But again, there is a little bit of a lag, unfortunately. The guide is from 2019 and that's pre-COVID. So there have been some modifications that time out at certain points. For example, there was a law last year that will end at the end of this fiscal year. And I think that they're considering something now further
About
open.
having a place where people can come to. Yeah.
Yeah. And potentially not having a place.
Mm-hmm.
I think COVID came that there are a lot of meetings that could be done virtually. So they're saying, rethought it. Or they're rethinking it, let's put it that way. Okay. And Kathy will work on that. Okay, any other areas that you saw in the bylaws? Nothing jumped out at me other than those two things.
Maybe something that raised a question for me was when to review the bylaws. Is it a regular interval? Is it every year? Do we not want a year? Like seeing the different dates, maybe think about that at the end of the document.
Well, the
So-
annual meeting of the board is the there are different types of meetings, and the January meeting is a big one for procedure and process with the voting. So it could be good to just remind people at that time, these are the current bylaws, take a look at them. If people see areas for revision, that would be a great time to kind of just regularize it and calendar that review.
Yeah, and then in the bylaws, it said something about providing written comment, I think. So that would be a meeting in advance, so it's reminding earlier than that to submit information. Should there want to be any changes, or if we just discuss it like we are now. See.
Yeah, so on page 4, it actually lays out that what would need to happen is we would bring written. The amendment would be submitted in writing at the July meeting and then wouldn't be voted on until the October meeting, unless we called a special meeting to vote. No, but it has to be a regular meeting of the board. So it has to
Regular
be
meeting.
July, October, has to be a regular meeting. Can I review what I am looking at for edits so that I'm sure I caught everything today? I won't go into great detail, but one thing is just to update any references to statute to make sure that they're in the proper form. For example, using the section sign. Looking at the bottom of page 1, Article 3, officers' duties and elections, Section 1, officers and election, looking at the way that the terms are spoken about, looking at that same thing in Section 2, terms of office, distinguishing somehow potentially full 1-year terms. In the Article 4, meetings, notice, and committees, updating the physical location of meetings to be 60 Washington Street in Barry. And then throughout that whole article, referring to open meeting law. So rather than stating all of the various timeframes, referring to current open meeting law, and then also looking into the quorum section or the quorum definition, Lisa, to be sure that that aligns with open meeting law, like you were recommending, taking out newly revised from Robert's Rules of Order. And I think that was everything.
Seems like a lot.
We thought that we were just going to be updating the address, but I think it's great if we have noticed
Yeah.
these things. It will certainly help the department. One thing I really care about is that we're kind of aligning with requirements, but not setting standards that are so high that they're hard for us to meet, and like having some clarity as we do our work, and making it a little bit simpler. Because I know I want to just say thank you to Adrian for noticing some things about the agendas and the other documents. And that really got me thinking about, well, what's the requirement in open meeting law? And how do I keep track of these two different things? I thought I was doing it right, but I clearly wasn't meeting everything about the bylaws every single time. So aligning that is really helpful.
You know, speaking of the agenda, I was looking at the agenda, maybe it was already corrected. It says the members, there's a person named Deborah Granquist listed. And I was like thinking it should be Linda Sarnoki.
Sarnayuki.
Where
Yeah.
was that?
Well, I'm seeing the Board of, I don't know if it's the one that was attached or if it's the one that's online though. So, because I don't know what I opened, but it's like the agenda and it's like got the Teams meeting thing on it and
Hmm.
I don't know if
Is
it
it
was
for
what we got.
today? Today's agenda?
Yeah, yeah.
Oh, I see it.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay. I don't know where it was.
We'll fix that.
Okay.
Good catch. Thank
I
you.
was like, did something change?
No, nothing
was-
changed.
Nope, because Deborah's
No.
off, yes.
And we can't
Yeah.
ever get Deb back because once you've done your 2 terms, that's the end. Thank you for noticing that.
Yeah.
We'll update that. And if it's listed that way on the January, then we'll update that as well. It's possible that that just carried forward. That was in the period of time where I probably scrambled and put the agenda together. So now we have Jess. She will help. Thank goodness.
Okay, anything else before we go on to the next? Okay, if not, I think your report is next there.
We actually have a quick topic before the report,
Okay.
which is number 5, required
Oh.
training for board appointees.
Oh, yes.
And I've got to say, this is confusing and it took me 4 or 5 months to get answers, but I have. So I have gone to the top. First, I went to Beth at Human Resources, and she's the Commissioner of Human Resources, Beth Fastigi. And then Beth said, you know, I'm not totally sure. And so Beth went to Jay Johnson, who is in the governor's office. And we have confirmed what training board members who are appointed need to take. So there is a state code of ethics training, which Tom and Adrian and Linda have taken. That state code of ethics training needs to be taken by any new, oh, James has also taken, I believe, the state code of ethics training. That was an online module.
Mm-hmm.
And that one, anybody who took it in the past, just you're covered. And Adrian, certainly in your role as a staff member, you've taken it as well, probably separately. But that one is, I believe, on the Secretary of State's website. Any of us can sign up. We can give you instructions to take that training. So that's the state code of ethics training. The second thing that has to be done is that people need to take a training on active ethics, active ethics, I think. Hold on. Okay, sexual harassment, racial equity, and implicit bias. Once you take this one time, I believe that will cover you for your term. What I'm going to do is to sign every board member up for those same training that I took as a gubernatorial appointee. I don't think that every staff member in the state of Vermont is expected to take those trainings. So Adrian, probably in your state of Vermont position, you haven't taken those. If you have already taken those, you'll just provide me with proof that you took them, the certificate, or even just attesting to it in an email is probably fine. But this is per the governor's order on ethics 4-22. And it says an appointee means any member of a public body appointed by or upon the approval of the governor. So that's all of you on the Board of Libraries, including executive officers and any exempt employee appointed by or upon the approval of such an appointee. And this was supposed to have happened within the first 120 days of public service, that an appointee shall engage in state-sponsored training on issues related to the active ethics, sexual harassment, racial equity, and implicit bias. Full-time employees must complete this training at least annually. So I take those trainings annually. You, as board members of the Board of Library, you'll take it once for the 4 years. There's a small cost to the department for conducting the training online, but I thought that the online was going to be the easiest way for you all to do it. It doesn't take that long. And what we can do is a per diem for you to take the trainings that are assigned. So 1 per diem for the trainings, because it's really not more than a couple of hours of clicking through things and listening to the information on the web training portal. So I don't want you to be shocked when this comes to you. I tried to get you all trained within the first 120 days of appointment, those of you who are new, but first I was told, no, you don't need the training. And Tom was CC'd on that email from CAPS. And then that didn't sound right to me. So I kept poking and pulling threads and found this is the right information. So moving forward, the department will always do this at the beginning of the time. We looked into maybe doing a session of training on these topics for you as a board. It was a little bit difficult to schedule that. And so that's why I think it's probably easiest to just have you take it on your own time, but to treat it as 1 per diem activity. Does that sound reasonable to you all? Okay.
Sounds to me.
Great. So I will sign you up, and Jess or I will share information on how to complete the training. And for anybody who needs a place to do the training, we can have you take the training at our Department of Libraries here in Barrie, or figure out some other way to do it if somebody needs access to a computer for the training purposes. Okay, that is all of agenda item 6, if there are no questions.
Any questions? Oh,
Yes.
okay, now.
Catherine,
Go for James.
I was wondering, is there a deadline by which this training has to be done?
I think it would be really great to get it done within the next month, so that we can kind of check it off of our list in our department, if that sounds reasonable to you all by the end. So maybe May 31st would be a good day to aim for completion.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
You're welcome. And we'll sign you all up using your partner.gov email addresses. So that will be where you'll find that, because it's an official activity associated with your participation on the board.
And I'll ask the question, Josh, the state, on those emails, the state always has a copy of it in there. So if I delete something on my computer, does that get deleted from the state as well? I thought Josh might know that, because we have to archive things, or just don't ever delete any of those.
I believe that it would, if you delete it, I don't know that there would be a record that would be maintained in that case. I think it would be, as long as it isn't deleted, it would be there, and they would be able to pull it up if needed, even if you were no longer using the account. But I think if you delete it, I'm not sure that's the case.
Okay, so then I would say, and this is for open meeting laws and everything else, don't delete any of the emails, because if somebody in 5 years says, we disagree with that and we want to check it out, they're doing, what's the term I want? Discovery. You have to maintain those emails.
Yeah,
So-
what we are able to do is our public information officer, they can request, if there were a request for documents related to our work on the board or the department's work, then we can do a data scrape, which is a really great system, but it does rely on the emails being there. And our assistant state librarian, Tom McMurdo, has his hand up. So I'm going to call on him because he knows the terminology
Okay.
and the process much better than I do.
Hi, thanks. Just to add a little bit to what Josh said, if you have email in that account, it persists for 2 years and then it'll drop off. So that is the case with state email, is that Agency of Digital Services preserves your email for 2 years. If you delete it, is it recoverable? I'm not 100% sure on that. I think yes is what I'm recalling from various document requests. Oh, April is telling me something different. Okay, so there seems to be some lack of clarity about this from Agency of Digital Services. April says that it goes to the online archive after 2 years, so perhaps that is the case. Okay, I withdraw my comment.
Something to remember too is that the way that we're using our email is good, because I don't think we're having sidebar conversations. I think everybody in our board is doing a really good job and understands that if we were to email as a group about something as, a topic of interest to us, we might have seen that Vermont's that there's a bill moving its way through the legislature that made it into the Washington Post, which is kind of cool. And that happened recently. S220 was mentioned in the Washington Post. If I sent that out to all of you, with all of you in the CC field, and then Lisa wrote back, wow, how awesome. Look, the school librarians in the article look like they're really happy. And then Adrian's like, I support this. And then Rick is like, brr, brr, brr. Suddenly we have a meeting on our hands, an unnoticed, not open to the public meeting, potentially. So our team here, your team, the board, is really, I think you've done really well. I don't see those emails going back and forth. We're using our emails, the partner.gov emails, we're using them in the right way. We're doing our discussion here in the meeting, and that's how it's supposed to be. And so I don't expect that you're going to have these data requests in the future. There have been some requests in the past, and it has been a real pain to try to get emails from people's individual accounts at home. That's why we use the partner.gov. But I think we've done some additional training on open meeting law and talking about this in this context, I think, is helpful to folks. We could schedule additional training on this if you'd like, or I could sit down and look things through with you and share what I know about it. But I think in general, we're using the emails in an appropriate way. We can talk about agendas. We can talk about, do you want to have a different location? We can do that sort of thing. And that wouldn't be a meeting. We're just doing administrative things. But, we could have an email about per diems and asking about how do you do that? And that would be fine to have that discussion. That's administrative. But if we're going to talk about anything really related to the work of the department or libraries or the current state of affairs around libraries, we wouldn't do that. But since we're using the emails the way we are, oftentimes my email could be scraped and we could find the communications with the board, is the other thing. So, if one of you deleted something, don't get panicked or worried too much. If it was an email with Tom, it sounds like he's probably saved it. And as long as it's discoverable, we'll get the email somehow.
Yeah. Okay.
That might be
Just
interesting
wanted-
training, like from CAPS with the open meeting laws or records retention schedules or anything.
Mhm.
That might be interesting as a side
Yeah,
note.
I agree.
That's more like
Can look into
supplemental
that.
information.
Yeah, we can look into that, and it could be something that we do every year at the January meeting. One thing that's tough is we're required to meet 4 times a year, and it is a little bit tough to get all of this in and do the regular business of the board. And so it could be that if we did an in-person meeting, which we've talked about doing in the summertime, that we could have the regular meeting and then do some just straight up training topics to get everybody trained up, meet in person, eat something,
Right.
refresh, and then do some training topics like this.
That would be great. It's like, so that could supplement the virtual meeting, having a annual in-person meeting
Mhm.
and maybe doing specialized training.
Yeah.
That sounds good.
Okay.
And also I have a separate situation of having a state email
Yeah.
on its own. So,
Yeah, and yours is definitely discoverable, so watch out what you say there, especially that 250. My son used to work for the Department of Public Safety and always said it was a mess with the state police and everything else. Yeah,
yeah.
doing
And I actually have 2
discovering.
emails. Yeah, I have a shared
Yeah.
inbox as well, where I send emails from.
So anyway, next, Kathy. Now is
Yeah,
it
then-
now is it time? Yes.
Now
Okay.
is it time? Yeah, now's the time
Now.
for the report. Here we are. I'm sorry that I didn't get the report out in advance. And I appreciate everyone's attention. I'm gonna go through everything that is in the report today because you didn't have time to read it earlier. And I think you'll see how it is that I was kind of too busy to get the report out in advance. We've been doing a lot here at the department since you last met as a board in January. Staffing updates, we have 2 pieces of great news. One of them, you met Jess, and just to share a little bit about Jess, she joined our team on March 25th, and she is in the role of executive staff assistant. And Jess brings experience as an executive director of a nonprofit to her work at the department, including managing budgets and communicating with a wide range of constituents. Something that really impressed me in meeting Jess was when she said, well, I know what I would want if I were going to testify, and I know what I would need if I were going to host meetings of this type, and I would hate going in unprepared, and I want you to be prepared. And I was like, oh, that's it. Bring her on board. So really excited to be working with Jess. We also have a new contracts and grants administrator. Her name is Mackenzie Boyle, and she joined the department at the end of February in 2024. Mackenzie comes to us most recently from the Department of Environmental Conservation. She was a program technician too there, and she brings a lot of experience managing grants to her work, and we're really enjoying working with Mackenzie. She has a fun sense of humor, and she has cute dogs in the background. And also she lives down in Jamaica. So Mackenzie comes on site pretty rarely, but we're really glad to have her. She was an award-winning team member in her former team and was recognized for her great work. And so we're really excited to have her on board, and she's been jumping in to help a lot. I think when you were here last, when we met last, I probably would let you know that we had filled a grant specialist position to work on the capital projects. Sadly, that person did not stay in the role, so we are working again to fill that position. So if you're wondering who's been working on these capital projects that Kathy will tell us about later, that would be me, Tom, Jeanette, Jess, and Mackenzie. So sort of in addition to our regular activities, we're keeping that project going, and I'll share more about that later. But we're also in the recruitment phase for the grant specialist position. We hope that we'll fill the position in the next couple of weeks. And we've still been trying to fill the program manager for those capital projects. We had posted it originally as a libraries building project manager 5 position. Crickets. Just very few interested applicants who were qualified and appropriate for our position. And we learned from our colleagues in buildings and general services that the similar positions they had posted, they were also having a heck of a time recruiting someone for those. So we have been working to reclassify the position, making it a contracts and grants administration manager position. So that one is going to be, I think, the same position as Mackenzie's, but only specific to the capital projects and a limited service position. So after those projects term out, the positions that fund them will also term out. So just to
How do
share
those two
Yep.
titles differ? How do they differ? Or like what really
I think that
changed
they
with the
differ
different?
in a typo. I think that that's something I need to update, that it should be contracts and grants should be just contract and grants administrator, I believe, but I'll confirm that. The positions are, it's really just a program manager type position who can supervise the grant specialist and administer the two federal programs within the state framework. But I'll confirm that, and I'll let you know if I listed it incorrectly. I think that they are parallel positions with the same title. So thanks for noticing that, Adrian. Taking out my trusty highlighter. Okay, so an update on the public library capital projects, and I know that Linda was really interested in this, so I'll be sure to point her toward this update too. We opened the applications on January 30th. They closed. There's a typo here too. I can see it. March 12th, not Mach 23. That sounds really fast. They closed on March 12th, 2024, and 71 public libraries applied for grants. And this sentence is wrought with typos. I am very embarrassed for myself right now. Okay, I'm just going to tell you the information and I will update it. 71 public libraries applied for grants ranging, and the grants will range from 400,000 to 1.4 million. And we did so much outreach, and it really paid off because we have seen applications from each of Vermont's 14 counties. So we're really excited to be able to grant out this money to support libraries. The specific project that we are working on right now is the Treasury project. So that is the one that's related to internet access for the purpose of work, telehealth, and education. These applications are currently being evaluated using a multi-phase process. So the first step is really looking at eligibility and completeness. Then there is quantitative scoring. So there are a lot of questions on the application and on the rubric where if the answer is yes, you get 50 points. If the answer is no, you get 0 points. If you're in this data group, you get 150 points. If you're in that data group, you get 50 points or no points. So that quantitative element is being scored now. And a huge thank you to Tom, and he's been helping me with quantitative scoring, so it's really helpful. The blind qualitative assessment is also going on right now, which is first the applications were, the relevant questions were redacted, and then they were assigned to consultants for blind assessment of how well the application aligns with the programmatic goals. And the consultants all recused themselves from certain libraries that they have the closest affiliation with. So nobody's evaluating a place where their spouse works or where they used to work, or that is their own town library. So there was a recusal process, a blinding of the applications, and then those scores will come back. Each application is being scored by 3 reviewers to try to keep this as fair and impartial as possible. There's also an aspect of financial scoring, looking at the risk assessments for each of the libraries. And then also BGS, Buildings and General Services, will be assisting us with building project and timing scoring, timeline scoring, really looking at, can they do this work for this amount of money? Does that seem reasonable? Can they do this work in this time frame? Does that seem reasonable? So that will all be scored, and then the ones that have the most points will be looked at very closely, and decisions will be made about those. We are hoping to, despite the staffing setbacks, to make those grant award decisions in late spring, early summer of 2024. So that is our update on the capital projects. Right now, this is a really busy time for the department because remember we submitted, the working group submitted its report on the status of libraries in Vermont. Well, Senators Ruth Hardy and Martine Gulick introduced S220, an act relating to Vermont's public libraries in response to that report. And during the first half of the session, when that report, bill S220 was in Senate Education, there was a week when I think they were going to give me a desk in Senate Education. I was basically just over at the State House all the time. They would update the schedule. I would rush over. So testifying quite a lot in support of the bill and helping to inform the legislature's decision-making process. So there have been some changes over the course of the bill. It no longer includes any provisions related to electronic books or I'm trying to think of the other big area that was taken out. There's nothing about, I don't believe that there is any language still about deadly weapons in the bill. So there have been some edits to really focus it more. One of the key things that the bill does is that in its current form, it includes language that would require all school libraries, public libraries, and the department's state library to adopt material selection and reconsideration policies. We would also at the department be empowered to develop model policies and guidelines for service levels in public libraries. So the department and I spoke to having that approach of developing model policies and service guidelines rather than going through the rulemaking process, because it's a much more nimble way to respond and because we don't really have any sticks or carrots to give. So with rulemaking, that we would have been potentially saying, well, you have to be open this many hours a week. And that could really be impactful for local communities in ways that we don't necessarily anticipate. And really the guidelines that are from 1986 that I believe went through the rulemaking process, there weren't really teeth behind those anyway. They were all recommendations. So if we're only going to make recommendations anyway, we might as well have a more nimble process and not have to engage in rulemaking was the thought. So we also are looking at language, the bill also includes language that would help to clarify the roles of trustees in both municipal and incorporated public libraries. That would just help them to better manage the libraries and have some of what they do called out specifically. That's in direct response to feedback that we heard in the working group. Oh, I have a piece of information to answer an earlier question, thanks to Tom. I don't think I did have a typo. So the position that's permanent in our department, the contracts and grants administrator, that Mackenzie Boyle is in, that is the correct title, contracts and grants administrator. The capital projects position is a slightly different position that includes the ability to supervise, as I had mentioned that earlier, but I didn't realize that they actually do have similar but slightly different names. And the temporary services position is a contracts and grants administration manager. So that manager position is a slightly different position from the permanent position with a slightly different but very similar title.
I think it was
Thank you,
Lisa
Tom.
or Adrian that asked that question, wasn't it?
It was Adrian that asked that question.
Yeah,
I think
Adrian,
so.
yeah.
So just to share quickly, back to S220, that bill was passed by the full Senate and now it's under consideration in the House, and it's currently being discussed in House Government Operations and Military Affairs. And I will be testifying tomorrow morning. And I'll share the department's support for the bill while suggesting a couple of small areas for improvements to the language. It would be really nice if the language about collections, the selection process, and the materials retention process, if that language could be aligned across at least the public libraries and the departments, and then potentially also with the school library collection, material selection and retention policies. To me, it would be more elegant if it all aligned, kind of what Rick was saying earlier, that it's nice when it kind of lines up cleanly throughout the statute. But the school librarians are very, very interested in keeping the language that they currently have. So we'll see how that turns out. We also will be asking for an implementation date, not of July 1st of 2024, but a year from now, so that we actually have time to develop policies and time for the model policies to be considered and adopted by individual libraries. Just timing wise, we want to make sure that people aren't jostled as they work on those policies. It would be very hard for public libraries particularly to consider and adopt policies in just a couple of months. Or even potentially, if a bill is signed in the end of June, in a couple of weeks, if it were to be implemented on July 1st. The other bill that the department has an interest in right now is S204. S204 relates to early childhood literacy. So it's an act relating to supporting Vermont's young readers through evidence-based literacy instruction. I asked that the state librarian or their designee be added to the state's advisory council on literacy. I think it was just an oversight in the earlier composition of that group, but the impact was really that suddenly kids are born, and then nobody was really doing in the, how do I explain? The whole period from when they're born till when they go to preschool and when they go to school, the kids were sort of floating free without early childhood literacy supports. But we know that's not true. We know that libraries, public libraries particularly, that's a lot of what they do to support emergent readers. And that's something that should really be thought about by the early childhood literacy providers in the state. And being part of that conversation seems important. So as it stands right now, there's language to add the state librarian or their designee to that advisory council, which is great. And then there's some language to have the department submit a written report to the Senate and House committees on education, not a report of the scale of the working group, thank goodness, but a report that's more narrowly focused on expanding access to early childhood literacy resources. So for example, book giveaway programs. There continues to be interest in the legislature in the idea of giving books to children in the highest need communities, particularly to support them and having libraries at home. We are going to be, if this passes, then our department will write a report that evaluates some of the programs that are implemented in other state libraries and in other entities to see which ones might be a good fit for our environment where we have not very much money, some very high need communities, and we want to find ways to work with libraries and support them potentially in creating a stronger connection to the public library. So not just sending a book to somebody's house, but potentially the family comes in and they have a story time and you read the book together and then you take the book home and it's for your home library. That type of a program seems like it might work well in our state. So we'll be looking at those options if we're called on to write the report. I just want to quickly go through a couple more things. We've been doing so much, like I said, and one of our team members particularly has been getting everybody ready for summer reading. So this year's summer reading theme is Adventure Begins at Your Library. And Jonathan Clark has been doing a lot to get libraries engaged in learning about the program, learning what resources are available to them. And Jonathan usually hosts a wintertime information session. And he did that this year, but he's also hosting in-person meetups of youth services librarians around the state. So in the coming weeks, he's going to go to 5 different libraries and inviting youth services librarians to meet up with one another, network with colleagues, and talk about program ideas and logistical hurdles that they face and ways that they solve them locally. And so that's an exciting thing that Jonathan's doing this year. We are also in the process, Mackenzie is hard at work, and I think Jess has been involved in it too, in evaluating the applications for the non-competitive grants of $300 that we give out to libraries in the state for summer reading activities. This year, we received 147 applications for those summer reading grants. It's down very slightly from last year, which is kind of shocking since we've been doing so much outreach. So we'll always be looking at meeting the metrics and growing, but we'll have to figure out what it is that some libraries would turn down free money. I want to see that number get up to 187. So we'll keep chipping away at that. I want to give kudos to Joy Warland, who is our small and rural libraries and continuing education consultant, and to Kevin Unrath, who's our operations consultant. They hosted the new library trustee training, which was attended by 75 public library trustees at the beginning of April. And they got some really great feedback that I'll share with you. After the training, 90% of attendees reported on the post-session evaluation that they felt more confident in performing their duties, and they intended to use something that they learned during the trainings at their libraries. And then we had this one really great comment from an attendee. It's clear that this was developed and presented by people with real experience with how libraries actually function. So instead of feeling like this was a bureaucratic lecture, it felt really useful and helpful. So that's kind of the best type of feedback we could get, that people enjoyed the program, that they found something useful in it. And for people who weren't able to attend, we record the sessions, and they're available to trustees and to library staff on the department's Niche Academy platform. You might think I'm done, but I was just taking a breath, so hang on. We also have an update on Fiber Connect grants. So I think I had mentioned earlier that the department will be decommissioning the Fiber Connect network. That has been a really successful program. The Fiber Connect network was a bridge that really helped libraries to get high-speed internet access when they didn't have any local service providers who could give them that service. At this point, with all of the build out of our IT infrastructure and of our connectivity infrastructure around the state, we found that all of our libraries do now have internet service providers, and that the department, we found that we weren't able to get funding to maintain or upgrade or expand our network. So we've been granting out funds to the libraries that were on the network as of, I believe, July 1st, 2022. And I'm proud to say that all 40 public libraries eligible for grants associated with decommissioning the network have applied for those funds, and that they've begun receiving checks. So that is really great news. And I want to thank Josh Muse, who has been working hard to communicate with libraries and make sure they know it's coming, and make sure that they know that they can get help and support. There have been conversations, little local groups, making sure that people can talk to their peers about who they have internet access with. Josh is always available to folks to help them transition. And from what I understand, the current activity that Josh is engaging in is really reaching out to each library and saying, what's the date that you're moving off the network? Do you need any extra help from us? Which is just wonderful. So many thanks to Josh, and he's been supported really capably by Tom in making this project successful. And okay, I have two more items here, and I appreciate a lot that you are still listening and awake. So thank you, board members, for that. The next update is that the Vermont Public Library Foundation, you may know it as VPLF, has decided to wind down the foundation in the coming year. So I am the president of the Vermont Public Library Foundation. Jeanette Schaefer, in her role as assistant state librarian for advancement, is also a board member. Tom Frank is your Board of Libraries representative to the VPLF. And there are two board members who are positional members from the Vermont Library Association. And Adrian had served as a board member on VPLF prior to Tom. We have been talking about the future of the organization for quite a while. And we ultimately have decided that the best thing to do is to really grant out the money that we have now and to move the Winnie Bell Learned Fund from VPLF over to the Vermont Department of Libraries for future grant awards from that fund, from the Rawson Family Fund. And since the Winnie Bell Learned Fund is really the only funding coming in, then there's not a real reason to continue the challenge of continue working towards maintaining a foundation just to maintain the foundation. It's really getting funding primarily through this one grant award annually from the Rawson Family Fund. And the department is able to administer that within our regular granting framework. And so since that primary source of funding will be moving over to the department, there is no real justification for all of the bureaucratic work that it takes to maintain the Vermont Public Library Foundation. Some folks might have questions about that and, what would happen if we got another giant infusion of money, like when the Freeman family gave $10 million. The Department of Libraries and the state librarian are still empowered in statute to set up a new nonprofit. And if we were ever to do that again, then we would really work on setting that up quickly and setting it up so that it's the type of nonprofit that aligns really well with the department's mission. The type of nonprofit that the VPLF is a supporting organization, and it's really tough. It can't even grant funds to the department to grant to other people and not other people, but to the public libraries. So it's a little bit different than the nonprofits that many other state libraries have, which support the work of the department in serving the public and have a little bit more flexibility in their purpose. So I think that if we ever do have an opportunity to receive a large amount of money, we would work to create a foundation that will work well for the department for that source and then potentially moving forward. This wasn't an easy decision, but I think from my perspective as a state librarian, it will simplify my work considerably, and it will also simplify Jeanette's work considerably. And I think it is for the benefit of the department to kind of move the Winnie Bell Learned Fund into a regular workflow for our team with work that we can assign to multiple staff members. Jeanette and I have really, and I think appropriately, kind of set up a dividing line between what we ask department staff to do and what we do independently for VPLF. So it's hard to be running a department and a nonprofit, and the fundraising nobody ever was getting around to it, and it's just been really difficult. So that's a little bit of a less happy face kind of announcement, but the really exciting, I'm going to end on a high note, which is that one of our staff members who's here today at this meeting, Lauren Kelly, has been recognized by the Vermont Shares Committee for the Believe in the Difference Spirit Award. And Lauren has been recognized because she continued to exhibit enthusiasm, compassion, and creativity in her role as our department's campaign ambassador. And the committee let us know that Lauren had found creative ways to promote, engage, and encourage employees to make donations through Vermont Shares, through VT Shares, and our department had a 94% participation rate. We know that Lauren's doing great work in that role, and this is one of those things where you look for a volunteer and everybody puts their finger on their nose and looks the other way. But Lauren has embraced this role, and we really appreciate her efforts with that. And so I just wanted to share that great news. And I believe Lauren has also now been, I think she's, as they do, first they give you an award and then they sign you up for the coordinating committee. So now Lauren's on the coordinating committee for that as well. But we're really excited for what she's going to do with that. And so with that, I will close out our report for today. And I want to say, if there are consultants who didn't hear their name this time, the report was getting really long, and I promise you will hear the great work that Karen Gravelin is doing next month, because could have a whole what's up in Able topic for you for next month. Um, and April Shaw as well is doing great work. So I think the other consultants, I mentioned all of you. So I'm going to turn it back over to Tom and take any questions you may have.
Okay. Or it used to be a town meeting day. The select board is now being interrogated. Are there any questions of Kathy that you have? I think I'm unmuted. Am I unmuted?
We
You
can hear
are.
you.
I don't have any questions. That was very thorough, very informative. Lots of different topics. I appreciate the detail.
And the
I'm-
qualitative and quantitative
Yeah,
data as well. Like the
Your-
feedback
your-
about the trustee training is qualitative.
We're trying to capture more of that kind of feedback, both doing by doing these post-attendee surveys, which is really, it's new for us to gather some of the metrics and to really send out surveys in that way. But that really helps us to identify kind of what we're doing that meets needs and what we're doing that doesn't meet needs. And we actually, just to mention something that is going on, I don't want to put anybody on the spot, but one of our consultants, April Shaw, independent of her time at, her work day at the department, has been getting a master's degree in, gosh, April, I may need to put you on the spot. And it's like an instructional master's. Can you tell me what the name of it is, April?
Yes, instructional technology.
Great, thank you. So April's been completing her work in that master's program, and she looked at the library community and what they need. And it's really great because her studies have already begun to influence some of the ways that we are teaching our, developing classes and teaching. So I think it might actually be good to hear about that from April in a future meeting if the board's interested. And also to hear about continuing education for trustees and for library staff from Joy and from Kevin, because that's a topic that's really come up a lot. I think sometimes people don't realize what we're already doing, and they'll say, well, we need more. But that's really, like, with trustee training, we're doing quite a lot. And with director training, we're doing quite a lot. So if the board's interested, that would be something to let Tom know about so that we can share kind of what we've been doing and how we've, I think, really, Joy's really, to Joy's credit, she kind of resurrected that program. And one thing that's really exciting, and I forgot to mention it in the report, is that we are, if S220 passes, it will empower the department to actually issue the certificates of public librarianship that we've already been signing and handing out to people. So it would really codify that role in statute and make it a requirement, change the language from may to shall, that we really need to provide this continuing education, that's one of our core focuses. Are you all interested in hearing something from some of the staff about the continuing education? And is that something that would be of interest to you for like a future agenda item?
I think it would be interesting.
yes.
Great.
And think about how best we can help and advise you, Kathy, when we hear these presentations, like having that perspective as well. Like if there are things that you wanted to have feedback on or discussion, having that be a little bit more focused instead of just like, here's what we're doing, but here's what we're doing with a particular focus.
Well, there is one area that I'm just curious about with the capital projects update. I had shared the way that we've broken down the scoring and how it's being done by different folks. Does that sound, if you're thinking of it from your perspective, many of you as trustees and library staff, do you feel that that approach will be well received by the public? We developed this process, but I wanted to just touch base. Does that sound like, given who we have to do the work, kind of chunking it and not having one person review the whole thing, does that seem like a good approach to you?
I think it's a good idea because then also that you can compare, does one person give everything high and other person give everything low? So you internally with three or so people doing it, that gives a check and balance as well. So if you have any complaints that, well, you got that rah rah, and then you can say, well, this is the process we did, and we're making sure it's well balanced, that one person doesn't make all of the decisions, and that it's fair to everybody. I think that's a good process.
Thanks, Tom.
There we go.
And I also wanted to say that I had a list of questions here that were all answered in the report. For example, when I first saw the term blind qualitative assessment of programmatic alignment, I wasn't quite sure I knew what that even meant. And then there are a couple of other titles, or should I say, assignments that had similar kinds of terminology that I was kind of confused about. So you explained it very well. I'm wondering whether or not the public will have access to the kind of information that you provided us with the explanations. Because that does give, I think someone was saying, well, some people grade high, I'm a high grader, other people grade low, but if there's more than one person doing this seemingly kind of complicated stuff, that it's good that it's explained, and it's good that it's more than one person doing it.
Yeah, thanks, James. I think, one kind of the easy answer is they'll have access to this meeting and they can go to this section and look at the minutes and hear it too. But it might not be a bad idea to, when we publish the list of awardees, give a little bit of an explanation of what the process was so that people understand how it was done. We talked with the public libraries and trustees who attended our webinars in advance and tried to explain in broad strokes what the process would be like. But having gotten the answers and really working with that, it's a huge data set of all of their answers and working on how will we evaluate this. We might be able to kind of write a brief description that would help people to understand just at a glance. So it's helpful to hear that you were wondering so that we know that the general public might be wondering too.
Right, because this is maybe not as common in the library fields. Maybe it is outside the state, but I know for other fields, I think music does auditions that are blind where you're playing and you're not being seen. And then it's about your ability, not like how you look or like your gender or anything like that. And that kind of ties again to that training, maybe implicit bias. So like having that training to inform that process. Or that's gonna help with that goal that the state has set. So it's good to be transparent and explain something that maybe not as common. Or maybe there are industries that do utilize that form of evaluation.
Yeah, I think
But that could
for
be
us,
another model policy. Go
yeah,
ahead.
it's interesting because probably when we first conceived of this, we thought that we would have 2 staff handling this whole activity. And in the absence of staff, we've needed to kind of get every team member involved in it. And so with that, we added this element where it's like, well, how can a consultant review the application? And really pulling out identifying information was, I think, a good way to do it. And I've worked in an environment where applications for jobs were redacted to the point where you almost couldn't figure out, it would say blank school. They went to blank college and blank state in blank city. And it was like, whoa, what's happening here? But you can kind of see then, you can kind of judge it sort of apples to apples instead of, oh, they went to Yale, or, oh, they went to Purdue, or, oh, they went to, Champlain College. It's like, well, okay, well, so they went to college. So there is, I think that that's part of what informed our work here, trying to make it as fair as possible and thinking about which aspects could we ask a program manager type person, one of the consultants who manages their own area, where could we use their support to take the load off of some of the rest of us? And what did we need to do to make that happen? So it's interesting. And I actually did redactions, and looking at them, it was like, oh, I have to take out not just the name of the library, but the river that's next to it, or the street that it's on, or how old the building is. Like in this question, we don't actually need to know how old this building is. So can I take that out? So it was really, for me, it was interesting to read through the answers. And I think it will also inform training that we provide in the future, because you really saw significant differences in the ability to communicate around the programs and the projects that they're working on, and to actually answer the question. You know, we have a lot of answers that don't seem to respond to the question. And there, we published the rubric in advance, so people looking at the application in advance saw what they would be scored on, and they still didn't always hit the mark. So this is an area that we can do more training for the community, and particularly ahead of the HUD grants, which are the second round of grants that we'll be administering, to help them be more competitive.
Getting someone up to that level, that is the area that I see here in Act 250, with a lot of the applications and different, and we do change the descriptions that the applicant, like, they have unnecessary information, or to clarify things, or use proper terminology. Some applicants are more sophisticated than others, and so there are some parallels that I see to that process. And then I also see it on the other end, which is after the reporting, and where could the department, maybe not another survey, but fold it into perhaps the annual report that is, you know, for all the public libraries, or some, you know, simplifying one place to collect some of that information. And then that can also be for the literacy projects as well. Okay, what kind of story times are you offering at Labs at Story Time? Are you offering something that's phonics based, or science, or, you know, like those are places where the department can get information where it's not like there's fatigue answering, okay, another survey, or because libraries are busy and they don't, you know, limited time. Capacity probably also is answering those responses that may not have quite hit the mark too. They might need more support or guidance to help them walk through the application. Some, like, before the application or during the application, being able to reach out.
Yeah, it's also a fine line, I think, between what do we want to know and what do we need to know. And that's something, as we're analyzing all of these rows and rows and rows and rows of data, I'm seeing areas where we may have asked more questions, we may have asked for more detail in some areas than we are able to easily evaluate and integrate into the final response. And I think Josh, in his role coordinating the public library survey, probably notices those things too. Like, there's always, what would you like to know? And then there's like, well, what are you going to do with it when you know that? Like, you know, thinking about a question on our current, some of the informational questions that we have. It's like, well, we gathered this, like, this is definitely, this is very interesting, but if it doesn't have a point attached to it, what do we do with that at this point? And you know, if somebody says, well, they have an endowment, but they can't use it for this project, well, then what does it matter that they have an endowment? And, you know, if they have an endowment that they could use for this project, but they've instead decided to put in a garden, well, then again, what does it matter that they have an endowment? So just thinking those things through, and it's definitely an area where we're learning as we're doing it. But I've been really impressed with the team that's working on it and how they're jumping right in. And we're excited to have some more staff join us to work on this. And you know, this is a case where it's so important to get this money for libraries, and we're doing our honest best to administer this as transparently and as fairly as we can, making these decisions.
Okay. Any other comments on this? And I was trying to get my agenda up, but my thumbs are slipping. I'm all thumbs when I do this. That's it. Thank you very much, Kathy. The next is, we got to determine the next.
Yeah, our next meeting is scheduled. Hold on a second.
Second Tuesday in July.
Yeah. Hang on a second. Somehow I don't have the page up on my.
Yeah, July 9th.
July 9th.
Yep,
Right?
July 9th at 10 a.m. And I guess a question for you all is, do you want to schedule that one in person? And do you have a specific geographic region you'd like to get to?
Let's see, that's a Tuesday. That's a good question. A lot of people on vacation or anything that time.
I'm making sure I'm back from Hawaii just for this meeting.
You're back from Hawaii. I got to
Yeah.
remember when I think I'm going to be in Tampa, Florida. By convention for the American Council of the Blind. It's that week, so
Oh,
I can
wow.
come in. I can come in. They do these conventions in summer. The nicest week in Vermont, and it's in Tampa, not Tampa. It's in Jacksonville, Florida,
Oof.
where it's hot and humid. But that's the way they do it. Yeah, I know it because I go down the Saturday and come back the following Saturday. Yeah, so I can do it remotely.
Well, we could also opt for the October meeting. I think October is also a really nice time to
Yeah.
do it in person. Do you want to do October in person?
Personally, traditionally, we've always done with the Able Library and the others, we've always done the October.
Okay.
It isn't snowing yet, but it tends to be a
Mhm.
still nice
Mhm.
time of year.
Yeah, let's plan on
Yeah.
that because the July 9th is kind of close to the early summer deadline
Yeah.
for the
I'm reading.
for what we're thinking of for when we may be able to award out things. So it might be tough to go someplace and be working on that at the same time for our department stuff. So we'll do Tuesday, July 9th at 10 a.m., our regular meeting.
Yeah.
And we'll do it virtually primarily, but with the on-site option for folks here in Barrie.
Right. Okay. That'll work. Okay. There any other comments, additions, corrections, whatever of anybody? If not, I thank all of you for attending. That was good. Thank Kathy and all the staff. And do I have a motion to adjourn?
I move to adjourn.
Okay. James have a motion to adjourn. Is there a second?
I'll
I'll
second.
second it. Oh, go ahead.
Okay. Yeah, it's a non-debatable Robert's rules. It's a non-debatable motion. Okay. All in favor of adjourning, signify by saying aye.
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 Hi.
If not, you can just hang around forever. But Kathy's going to close out Teams, I'm sure. And remember, you can always, check in with Kathy, me,
Mhm.
Jess, if you need any information. Before I
Mm-hmm.
tried not to call Kathy, but now we got Jess to bother. So that's good. She can run interference. So once
Well,
again,
I'm
thank you.
always happy to talk with you, but I know Jess is too, so.
Yeah. But I've called there that they'll say, I haven't seen Kathy for a week. She's over in the legislature all of the time, which she has been up to now. So, okay. Thank you very much, folks.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hey, everyone.
Bye.